What I want to ask you is when you transitioned into this high intensity training, can you give like a sample routine for those listening, how that looked? And when did that evolution come about? Like a phase of that, for example. Was it similar to what you did, just chop down the sets or?
No. So if you go really early on in my training career, again, this is even before like social media, a lot of the top bodybuilders at the time in the UK, it was either all about Dorian Yates or it was people that associated themselves with Dorian Yates. So people like John Hodgson, even within the BNBF, there was a company back in the day in the UK called CMP, who Dorian Yates was affiliated with early on, run by a man called Kerry Kays. They sponsored a lot of top bodybuilders in the UK. A lot of their training methodologies were popularised in magazines and here, there, and everywhere. People like Vicky McCann, Rob Hope. So it was very Dorian Yates style. So it was just like that. So like anyone, you try something the first time and you borrow parts from that particular type of training that you like. And then as you experience things, as we mentioned earlier, sometimes on a particular exercise, you can't fatigue that muscle within one set because you're not efficient enough at it. So you might need to go at it a few times. There you're bringing in the higher volume. So that's where that mixture of different training principles comes about. So it's understanding and liking all the principles behind high intensity, but adapting it to what you feel like you need. Even now, like I'll try something different within an exercise. It might even be just something simple like an internal cue, and that makes me perform the exercise a little bit differently, and then I'll get more out of it. I think everyone should be doing that to some degree, even if you still follow the same principles. Try and learn something and perfect and hone what it is that you're doing. I remember a conversation between me and Dave Kay, and at the time he was struggling a lot with injuries. You know, he would deadlift and then he'd get something else happen, and then he wouldn't be able to deadlift for ages. I remember saying to him, like, at this point in our lives, it's no longer about how hard you can train. But that's not in question. We can train hard. It's how hard you can continue to train without getting injured. So sometimes being a beast and getting that extra rep or two on a deadlift is not going to be the difference between you being better or not. It's actually being disciplined enough to leave those reps alone and being able to deadlift next time and the time after. At the same time, knowing all this, there's still that idiot that lives in here that goes, I want to do it. And you'll still want to do those reps. So it's being disciplined enough to not do it.
You know, that drew me to just one last thing, if you don't mind, bro, because I'm fascinated by this. Yeah, because we were talking about this earlier about pushing yourself and applying effort, and with certain things, certain exercises, you can really be more efficient with it just because of your ability to really take yourself to failure and get a lot out of it, basically, with say 2 sets, for example. If that was the case for every body part, is that the approach you would take? Would that be considered in your mind more optimal if every body part could respond like that to every exercise you'd selected it for it? Of course, this is not practical necessarily in all cases. It's more of a curiosity thing. Like, would that be your ideal way of approaching things where you do 2 sets, like almost like a Dorian Yates or modified version of what Dorian Yates does for maximizing muscle growth?
If I couldn't do anything else, that is what I would do. Yeah, I think that's what gives you the most progression. But that's not to say that the other styles of training don't have their place and don't bring something to the table, because they do. And I believe you're better for using those, whether it be in a cyclical fashion or whether it be integrated into what you're doing all the time. I think the types of growth you can get out of doing multiple sets of something has its merit. It's not all about just chasing load and getting stronger. I think that higher intensity model is slightly geared a little bit more towards like progressing strength and all that kind of thing. But I don't think strength alone, or the more centered training towards strength, gives you out and out the most muscle. And there might be a little bit of like genetic variation from person to person, possibly, where certain people aren't going to get very much out of that at all. They need a lot more volume. And I think females in particular, because of their genetic makeup, they need a lot more training, I think. But high intensity, low volume stuff, not the best way to do it. I think that if you just train with a girl, you see how fast they recover. If they were putting a massive amount of stress on their body with one set, they wouldn't be able to recover that fast. All the top females that I've trained with all recover really, really fast and all train a lot.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I can talk about this stuff for days, but it seems like we're back to kind of where we ended the last time we spoke about this just earlier.
I don't profess to be like an expert at anything, but
No, but
anecdotally, I've noticed.
That's all we're looking for, man. The anecdotes, right? We want to know your experience. So it's interesting because, of course, I've spoken with so many top level natural pros, and especially from the UK, mostly everybody's doing a similar version of that approach, that high intensity Dorian Yates style approach, with the exception of a few guys. So that's why it's always interesting to me just how things are being done and what you've learned along the way and how you might approach things differently now, which you gave us all of it, man. So that's, or you gave us enough to think about things, basically, maybe perhaps differently, or question things, insightful, motivation, however you want to take it, the listeners. But I think it's cool stuff nonetheless. Did you have a staple routine that you maybe followed throughout your competitive years, where you were competing at the level that you did, that you not only enjoyed, but that you found worked very well for you? And if you did, what did that look like in more detail? So we're talking like